Crafty Gemini, and in this video I want to talk about interfacings and stabilizers that we tend to use when we're making bag projects. If you've already tried your hand at either making a handbag or some type of pouch or organizer, then you're probably already familiar with some of the interfacings and stabilizers that I'm going to be mentioning in this video. Now, I host a lot of online bag clubs, wallet clubs, and even organizer of the month clubs, and we're getting ready to launch a new one. And I still often get the question, why are we using woven fusible interfacing over non-woven fusible interfacing versus batting or felt or fusible fleece or foam interfacing? There's a lot of different products out there that you can use for your projects, and some can be interchangeable and others not really. So I want to go over some of the ones that I find in my handbag making projects that tend to be the most commonly used ones, and I hope that it makes it a lot easier for you to understand by me showing you some visuals, showing you fabric by itself, and then fabric attached to the specific interfacing or stabilizer. And as usual, remember that I always include a link for you on where you can find the supplies and materials that I'm talking about in this video in the description box below the video player right here on YouTube. Now let's jump right into the video. Now, to break up the content for this video, I wanted to break it up into more manageable chunks. So first we're going to discuss some of the most popular stabilizers that are used for the exterior part of your projects. And for projects, I'm talking things like handbags, wallets, organizers, functional type of pieces like a laptop case, a cell phone carrier, that kind of stuff. And so first, let's talk about probably what is, I think, the most common stabilizer used today for these types of projects, and that is foam. So here I have an example of just quilting cotton fabric by itself just as it came off the bolt, and I just cut a chunk off. And I want you to see and keep your eye on the difference between fabric by itself and once I have attached it to a different type of stabilizer, so you can get a good visual on what the interfacings and stabilizers are going to do to the actual fabric. And that, I think, understanding how it makes the fabric look after it's been attached to it is going to help you choose the right stabilizer for some of your future projects. Now, of course, in my handbag and wallet clubs and organizer clubs, I always, will tell you which one to use for what. So this is just a good refresher for some of you that maybe are in my clubs, or if you're looking to get into handbag making. So that's fabric by itself. Let's see what it looks like once we've attached it to foam. So this is a foam stabilizer, and it looks like this by itself out of the packaging. This comes in a sew-in version, meaning the only way to attach it to the fabric really is going to be to sew it to it. You can quilt through it also. Or in the case of this piece I have here, you can see that this side looks slightly different to this one. This is kind of more a softer, foamy side, and this side is actually a little bit scratchier feeling because this is the side that has kind of this tricot fabric and some adhesive on it. So that means to me, just by looking at it, I know that this is a chunk of the one-sided fusible foam interfacing. So it comes in a sew-in, which doesn't have adhesive on either side. It also comes in a one-sided fusible like this piece, and also in a double-sided fusible, okay? And I'll include a link in the description box below on where you can get the one that I use. I like to use the kind that's just the sew-in. It's like this, and it comes in a packaging 18 inches wide, so half a yard wide by 58 inches. And you can see that both sides looks the same. There's no adhesive on either side. Now, some of you may be wondering, and I get this question a lot, how do you get rid of these creases because the product does come folded up in a package, all right? Super easy to do. I recommend that you just get an iron with some good steam and hover it slightly over. You don't want to touch the interfacing with it, but you want to just hover it above so that the steam gets right into those creases, and you'll see that the compression points here where it's been folded will just kind of reinflate and bring the foam right back to life. And that tip, for any of you wondering, will also work on the fusible products. All you want to make sure that you do is not touch the iron to the actual adhesive part, because then you know what's going to happen, and the adhesive is going to stick to the iron. But I've done it on all the different interfacings that have one-sided or two sides that are fusible, and as long as I stay up and above of the adhesive and steam it, it comes right back to life, all right? So again, there's a link in the description box below on where you can get this stuff. So that's the foam by itself, and I want you to see the difference between fabric by itself and fabric that's been fused to a chunk of that one-sided fusible foam. So here's an example of where I used the foam interfacing, and that's in this simple tote bag. You can see that it's empty, but it stands up all on its own. So it adds great shape, all right? At the same time, I can kind of squish this up, and when I let it go, give it a little shake and pop it back into shape, and it just comes right back to life. So really easy to work with. It's also really easy to sew through because as you saw with the creases on the folded one, you can imagine that when you stitch through it, it really stitches up easily and like butter because it's foam. So the stitches compress it right where it needs to, and it works out great for projects like this. Now let's set that aside and let's discuss another one. If you're unable to get your hands on a foam stabilizer, here's one that seems to be pretty popular as well, although you will not get the same effect with this. This is going to be a fusible fleece. So it kind of looks like a batting or a felt. You can see that it still has a nice drape to it, but one side you'll notice that might be a little bit scratchier than the other more fleecy kind of side. And again, whenever you feel little scratches on stabilizers and interfacings, this to me represents adhesive. So there's tiny, tiny dots of adhesive that when you place that on the wrong side of your fabric and fuse it from the fabric side, it sticks to it, making it one piece. And then you would, cut your fabric pieces out. So you can see that it still maintains some nice drape, although not as drapey as the fabric by itself. So again, for these types of projects, we're looking for some body and shape. But you can see that it drapes a whole lot more than the foam does. So keep in mind, say you're making a tote like this, and the pattern calls for foam, and you use a fusible fleece because you can't get your hands on foam. Don't be disappointed when the shape of the bag does not turn out like the pictures or the pattern calls for because you substituted the stabilizer. Does that mean that the bag won't work in fusible fleece? Not necessarily. It's just going to be a little bit droopier. Okay, so keep that in mind also. So that is fusible fleece. Now a couple of the other ones that you can also substitute, especially in the case of fusible fleece, I would say, if the pattern calls for foam and you don't use foam, you can still work out the project, but it's not going to have anywhere near the shape that the foam is going to give it. So here I have a piece of felt, and you can see that it's really difficult to tell the difference between a fusible fleece and just post-consumer recycled bottles type of felt that you can get. This is just craft felt. They look really, really similar. Same thickness, same weight, and they really are going to play pretty similar in the project once you fuse it to your fabric. Now remember, this is fusible fleece, so you can fuse it because it has adhesive. The felt doesn't have adhesive on it. So all you would need to do is use some type of temporary spray adhesive to kind of put the layer of fabric with the felt together. You can also quilt through the layers, just somehow attach it to your fabric, and then it will play very closely to what a fusible fleece would. Now also keep in mind that there's so many different types of stabilizers that different manufacturers will make these at different widths, or different thicknesses, I should say. I've seen fusible fleeces that are super, super bulky. So again, look at it and compare and know that, of course, if it's thicker than this, then it's really not going to be, your finished chunk of fabric or your panel for whatever project you're working on is not going to look like this. It might be a lot thicker. So the thickness is going to come in mind when you're looking to see how it's going to affect the shape of the finished project, but also very important, the machine. If your machine is not very heavy duty, I definitely recommend that you stick to some of the thinner stabilizers because you might have some problems, especially when you get into points like this where there's a lot of seam intersections and added layers of bulk of, say, lining, exterior fabric, foam, and things like that, then top stitching. So depending on the complexity of the bag project you're working on, you may run into some issues with your machine if it's unable to sew through all the bulk. So these are some good options to replace. The fusible fleece is that post-consumer recycled bottle, craft felt kind of stuff, and then also just simple quilt batting. If you're a quilter and you've made quilts before, this is really going to depend on how thick your batting is, but this is 100% cotton batting, and you can see that it's about the same thickness as the felt that I use, which is also the same thickness as the fusible fleece. So it's about the same, but because it's cotton, it's a little bit drapier. So again, if you wiggle your stabilizer like this and it just kind of flops around, know that when you add just one simple layer of cotton fabric to it, it's not going to change the hand that much. And if you are a quilter and you have a lot of batting on hand, think about what your finished quilts look like and what kind of drape they have. That's probably going to be what it's going to translate into in your handbag or wallet or whatever type of project that you're working on. All right, so those are some of the most commonly used exterior stabilizers: foam, your fusible fleece, your cotton batting, and then another cheater way to get that similar weight I mentioned was to use that craft felt. So now let's move on to some of the more commonly used ones for the inside or lining pieces of fabric. Now, in my experience, these are the two, probably I would say, the most popular types of interfacings that are called for in specific bag and organizer and wallet type of projects for inside pieces, like the lining of a handbag or inside zippered pockets in a tote bag or something like that. And these are, a lot of people seem to get them confused, so I'm hoping that this will help clarify this for some of you out there. This here is 100% cotton woven fusible interfacing. So you can see that it's kind of sheer. And you can see that even without me getting a really, really tight close-up, you can kind of see the threads in the fabric that run vertically and horizontal, just like it does in our regular cotton fabric, because it's woven just like a quilting cotton. Now, this side of it is smooth, but when I flip it over, on this side, I can feel that it's a little bit scratchier. And again, remember, scratchy equals dots of adhesive. So that tells me that this is the side that I want to fuse to the wrong side of my fabric, all right? So this is woven fusible interfacing, which really what it is, I would say, in my opinion, at least how I like to describe it, is that it's just a thin version of your quilting cotton. So it's going to add, it's almost like making it 2 layers of a quilting cotton, and it just adds a little something else to the fabric without allowing it to kind of be too droopy and floppy, especially in the inside lining of a bag. Now, the other product is a non-woven interfacing. So this one I said was woven, and then the other one is a non-woven. So this is a synthetic. Now, one side feels kind of like, if you're a machine embroiderer, this kind of feels like a cutaway stabilizer. And then the other side, you can see on camera that it almost has like a sheen to it. So that shiny side, this is a matte side. The shinier side is the side with the adhesive. So this is the side that you want up against the back side of your fabric when you go to fuse. Now, this is a synthetic, and this I said is 100% cotton. So if you know about iron settings, you know that you definitely do not want to hit this guy, even on the non-fusible side, with your hot iron. So you always want to be fusing these products from the fabric side, except in the case of the woven interfacing, that's 100% cotton. It's kind of the same as the fabric. So sometimes I'll press from the fabric side and I'll flip my panel over and fuse again from the woven side. But I definitely do not do that with the synthetic non-woven fusible interfacing. Now this, the best way to describe it to me is kind of like it's crisp. It kind of feels a little bit like paper, but it doesn't rip like paper, or kind of, but it's just like tighter. Like the fibers are a little bit more close together, whereas this really just has the hand of a lightweight muslin with some adhesive on it to fuse. All right, so you can see the one that's been fused already to fabric. This is the non-woven fusible interfacing. You can see that it's kind of stiff, okay? Now, some projects will call for this, not all right? So you got to make sure that you're reading your patterns and understanding what the designer had in mind. That doesn't mean that you can't substitute one for the other, but you have to know how it's going to play in that specific project. If it's something that they're trying to minimize the amount of bulk in the seams, then you may not want to go with the stiffest one and be adding all those additional layers in the seams of whatever your project is. Now, this is the one with the woven fusible interface, and you can see it's kind of like home deck weight fabric at this point. So it's just a little bit smoother. The fabric doesn't wrinkle as easily, and it just doesn't get as droopy as fabric by itself. So this is very, very often called for in your handbag project. So a lot of people are always wondering, well, why do I have to buy non-woven and woven interfacing for these wallets or bags? And they really are different, and each of them is going to have, they're required for their own application. So this guy's a little bit droopier, but still crisper than the fabric by itself, and this one is just a little bit stiffer than that one. So now I'll show you that woven fusible interfacing again on this inset zipper. You can see that when I punch it down, it stays nice and smooth and flat. This is doubled up, and if I had made it just out of fabric by itself, there's no way, it just would not look as clean and as crisp and smooth like that, even if I pressed it, because the fabric itself would be a little bit droopier and it kind of would move around and bubble around. But you can see, even like this, look how stiff that stays. And it's not a hard hand on it, but it just has more shape and body to it, okay? So that is another place where I used it, and I also use it in the zipper tab ends because I want this to look just a little bit crisper than if it was just droopy fabric where the zipper teeth would be kind of bending in there. And once you start to make projects like this, you'll get a good feel for what will work where, and you'll also know that if you make a pattern and it doesn't call for it, and you know that you want it to look a little bit more smooth and crisp like this, then you'll say to yourself, okay, well, I know I want to interface it, let me go ahead and do that. Now, I wanted to show you a couple other projects that use some of these interfacings that we've covered, just so you can see them used on the exterior. So here's a little pouch that I made, and this is made out of fusible fleece. Could I have used the foam? Yes. It would still keep its shape similar to this, but I wanted something a little bit more pliable and not quite as rigid as the foam would have probably made this. So if I open this up, and this is for like essential oil, nail polish bottles and things like that, you can see that even empty, it holds its shape. So again, this is fusible fleece. Could you use the foam? Yes. In this type of an application, because it's smaller, although the fusible fleece is a little bit more fluid than the foam, all right, it still keeps its shape because it's a little bit more compact and stuck together. So if I use the batting, it would probably still stand up, but it wouldn't have as much body as the fusible fleece. And then one step up from fusible fleece would be the foam. So again, it's kind of like you have to keep in mind and know how the different stabilizers are going to react when they're made into a project, okay? So that's one use of fusible fleece on the exterior. And when I say fusible fleece, you can also use fusible batting. They tend to be a little bit thicker and tend to be about the same weight as a typical fusible fleece. Now here's one where I used the non-woven, okay, fusible interfacing for the exterior. Although I mentioned it here to be used for the inside linings, here's where I made it, and you can see, I think in this project, the crisp hand that it has, okay, it has more body, and you can see empty, it still stands up. Do you see that? But because the stiffness of that non-woven fusible interfacing allows it to stand by itself, it has some good body, but at the same time, because it's thinner, all right, it allows me also to store it flat. So if you're looking for something that's more compact and flat, you're probably going to want to steer clear of the foam, because remember, the foam is bulky. Even though it doesn't add additional weight, it will make things a lot chunkier and loftier than if you use one of the flatter and thinner ones. And that's just some of the different interfacings and stabilizers that you can often use in your different bag projects, organizers, and kind of practical type of projects, which I always love to design and make. And so if you're interested in learning how to make handbags, wallets, and things like that, again, I'll include a link for you in the description box below the video, right here on YouTube, on where you can do a little bit more research and find out about the dozens of online courses that I currently offer. If you're in the mood to get started with a brand new Bag of the Month Club, stay tuned, because I will be coming to you very soon with another video showing you the different projects that we'll be learning how to make in the new club and all the details where you can get in for the early bird sale price. This is going to be my 6th club that I've launched in the past 4 years, so we've been doing this for quite a while. If you've seen the videos and you've seen the information, but you still haven't taken the jump and joined one of our online clubs, this might be the one for you. So thanks again for watching this video. I hope you learned a little bit more about interfacings and stabilizers to use in your bag or wallet projects. And if you enjoyed the video and you like what you see, remember to give it a thumbs up below, and don't forget to click that subscribe button as well. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to share this video with some of your friends, and I will see you in the next video.